Hey there, I'm KJ from Low Poly Models World, and today we're going to take a look at Blender, an open source 3D software you can use to create content for platforms like Decentraland. It's one of the most complete programs available. You can make 2D and 3D animations, environments, videos, images, physics. It's awesome. Only some of those features are currently compatible with Decentraland though, so let's focus on them. Okay. So when you open Blender, you'll see a cube, a light, and a camera. If it's your first time opening the program, head on over to the preferences and make sure the setup is appropriate for your machine. Depending on the kind of mouse and keyboard you're using, you might want to set up a couple of things in the preferences here. You can emulate the numpad on your keyboard. That will give you access to some of the shortcuts that can come in handy when using Blender. And you can also pretend that a 2-button mouse is a 3-button mouse if you don't have a 3-button mouse yet. Okay, there's loads that can be customized here in the preferences panel, but that's enough to start with. On our 3-button mouse, you can use the left mouse button to select an item. I hope you can see my commands here in the bottom left-hand corner. You can use the right mouse button to open an options tab and the scroll wheel to zoom in and out. You can also use the scroll wheel push down to orbit around the scene and the scroll wheel push down and combined with the shift button to pan. So middle button or your scroll wheel to zoom in and out, and when you push it down you can pan, and when you push it down and combine it with shift you can orbit. Cool. So now you can move around the scene. Another handy way to do that is to use the numeric pad or the numpad on your keyboard. You can press 1 for the frontal view, 3 for the side view, 7 for the top view, and 9 to flip any of those views. You can also use the number 5 to switch the perspective to orthographic and back again. Other numbers on the keypad can be used to move the point of view or kind of rotate it and shift it a bit. Okay, on with the handy buttons, and if this is starting to get confusing, I apologize. If it's your first time using Blender, it can be a bit weird, but you'll soon get your head around it. I'm going to put some links in the description box below to a couple of useful PDFs that have Blender shortcuts in them, just to kind of give a summary of all this. So G, R, and S are the next buttons we're going to take a look at. You can use G to move something, R to rotate it, and S to scale it. You can combine those actions with X, Y, or Z to move, rotate, or scale exclusively on that axis. You can also use G, R, or S with Shift X, Shift Y, or Shift Z to move, rotate, or scale on all axes except for that one. There are 2 different modes in Blender, Object Mode and Edit Mode. At the moment we're in Object Mode, and any modifications we make happen to the object as a whole. If we go into Edit Mode by pressing Tab, we can select the individual parts of an object and use G, R, and S again to change the object's appearance. We can also inset faces with the I button and extrude with the E button. The same goes for edges and vertices. Cool. Another useful shortcut is Control and R, and what that does is add loop cuts to our object when in edit mode, and you can use the scroll wheel on your mouse to increase or decrease the amount of loop cuts. Or if you want an exact number, you can use the numbers on your keyboard. Up until now, we've been working with the default cube in Blender, but what if we want to work with another shape? So to add a shape to the scene, we can press Shift and A and then select an object from the drop-down menu. It's usually best to do this in object mode rather than in edit mode. The main options are basic solids. So pyramids, cubes, spheres, cylinders. These are the building blocks for whatever you want to create in 3D. When you add a new object to the scene, You can define some of its properties, like the amount of geometry or detail that's present. Head down to the box in the bottom left-hand corner, just after adding a new object to the scene and before doing anything else. You can adjust the shape's level of detail there. If you want to duplicate an item, select it and press Shift-D. If you want to repeat the same action several times, press Shift-R. Okay, cool. So far we've been in the Layout tab in Blender. This is a great setup for modeling. You'll notice at the top there are several other options to choose from. Let's change over to the Shader tab and take a look at adding color and texture to models in Blender. By default, everything made in Blender starts without a shader. So let's create a new material and add it to our object. This is just a plain color and will be applied all over our object. And we can make a new material with a different color and assign it to some of the object's faces. We can also add an image texture for a higher level of detail. To do that, in the Shader tab, press Shift-A to add a new node and select Image Texture. Load your image texture into the node and plug it into the color input of a principled BSDF node. If you'd like to learn more about materials and textures for Decentraland, check out the video link in the top corner. In that video, we talk about creating rough, metallic, transparent, and glowing materials for DCL. We can then head on over to the UV Editing tab and change how the image is projected onto the shape. Remember, if you're creating content for Decentraland, images need to be certain sizes in order to be read and rendered correctly by the engine. The sizes that work in Decentraland are powers of 2, up to a maximum recommended size of 512 by 512 pixels. Some other image sizes you can use are 256 by 256 pixels, 256 by 512 pixels, or any combination, 128 by 128 pixels, 64 by 64 pixels, 32 by 32 pixels, 16 by 16 pixels, etc. Okay, now let's take a look at some of the other features Blender has to offer that can be super useful for creating content in Decentraland. If you're working with any pre-made assets, like those from the builder or from another website, you can import them to Blender for modifications. Head on over to File, Import, and select your format. Most of the time when working for the Decentraland platform, you'll be using GLB or GLTF files, as these are the two supported 3D file formats. Once you're ready to test your models out in the metaverse, you can export them as GLB or GLTF files. To do that, select the objects you want to export, apply all transforms with Ctrl-A, apply all transforms, and then head over to File, Export, and select GLTF 2.0. in brackets GLB GLTF. This will open a window with customizable export options. Make sure to check Selected Objects and Custom Properties in the Include drop-down tab. In the Transform tab, check +Y up. In the Geometry tab, check Apply Modifiers, UVs, and Normals. And in the Animation tab, you don't need to check any of the options unless you're creating an animated model. Okay, cool. You can check exported objects in the builder, the Decentraland preview, or sandbox.babylon.js. In most of those cases, you can just drag and drop your GLB or GLTF into the platform and take a look. Okay, I'm not sure about you, but that sounded pretty complicated to me, so let's put it in practice, which I think makes things a lot easier. So let's make a tree or a couple of trees, and we'll just kind of go through the steps so you can see what those buttons mean in practice. Okay, so I'm just getting rid of the camera and the lights here, and then we're going to start from our cube. I'm going to go into frontal mode with 1, scale the cube down, lift it up a little bit, head into tab mode, and I'm going to grab the top face. I just used 3 on my keyboard to do that, but I could have done it by switching here from vertex to face. Okay, so let's scale this down a bit and bring it up. Okay. Now let's add some loop cuts in here. With Control R, scroll button to add more, and then we're going to give the tree some movement. And I'm going to turn on proportional editing for that, which is up here, or you can press O, to go straight to that. Okay, so let's grab a few, and the proportional editing creates kind of this circle of influence for us. It's more of a sphere actually, and it can just help us give a little bit of more organic movement. Okay. And we can use it in combination with scaling, rotating, and moving. Okay, cool. Now, what we can do is scale this on all axes except for Z. So in essence, making the trunk of our tree a little bit slimmer. But I'm going to come down here and make the base a little bit wider. So because I'm in frontal mode, I can only see 2 vertices at the front. And I also want to modify these 2 at the back. So in order to see them from the frontal view, I'm going to hit Option Z, and that gives us an X-ray view of what we're working with. So again, with proportional editing on, I'm just going to scale this up a little bit, the way most tree trunks seem to work. And we can slide these vertices down a little bit with double G. Okay, and let's come out of X-ray mode and start adding some kind of tiers of leaves and branches to this. Okay, now we can use the pencil tool to draw around the essential shape that we want. So the tree is leaning in this direction just a little bit. So we're going to want to add some branches all over the place, but we also want to make sure we have that original shape, the basic shape, nailed. So let's do something maybe like this, and we'll cut it into a few tiers. Okay, so let's add another basic shape to this. Let's go with an icosphere. And down here, we could change the properties and the level of detail if we wanted to. But for now, let's keep it at 2. Now let's play around with this shape a little bit until it starts to resemble our bottom tier of the tree, like the bottom section. Okay, so we'll do it just roughly to begin with. One here, another one here. Let's just collapse this box, there we go. Give it a little rotation, and let's actually bring it a bit higher up. And then we'll do one more for the top. So I'm scaling it on all axes minus Z, and I'm going to scale it on the Z axis, rotate it. And now I'm actually going to go into edit mode and change these bits here with proportional editing on. Okay, so now let's just grab some vertices and give this some movement. And let's switch to a side view as well to make sure that it is actually doing what we want it to do from all angles. Let's give it a little movement. Also towards the back. And now let's come in and do the same with this one here. And just add a little more organic movement. Again, the proportional editing tool is super useful for that. Let's come to the front view again. That's probably a bit too much. Okay, so let's pull some of the sides out. Give it a nice kind of bumpy shape. Okay, let's check out the back with number 9. Which, if you remember, is the opposite of whatever view we were looking at before. And let's just find kind of like a nice playful shape for this. Okay, and we'll just move on to the last section of the tree here. And again, just add a little more shape and randomness. Now I want to just scale this down a little bit. And the base as well, I think. Okay, let's hide our annotations. Up here, we can uncheck annotations and come back to our cursor. Okay, so this is a bit blocky for my liking, so a quick way to change that would be to add a Subdivide surface modifier in here. And we can keep it simple, which is gonna keep it looking blocky, unfortunately, no matter how high we put our level of detail. Or we can do a Catmull Clark and then just adjust the shape accordingly. So I'm gonna have to scale and position things a bit differently to before because we've got this modifier applied. Okay, now let's put a plane on the ground here and it'll give us a better idea of how this sits. We definitely want to pull it down a little bit more. Okay, nice. Now let's just pull out a couple of branches at the bottom here. So we could either add in a loop cut or 2 loop cuts here and then pull out branches, or we could shift A and add a cube or a cylinder and make something that looks like a branch and add it in. Okay, for now let's do this, and we'll just add a loop cut in the middle, move it a little bit. And again, we'll apply a subdivision surface modifier and just make a few modifications to the scale and rotation of things, as the modifier will change the way they look. Okay, that's one there, and let's just add another one, scale it down give it a rotation on the z-axis. And I don't want it to be exactly the same as the other one. Okay, we can do that, and I'm just going to add one more. Okay, so that will do for now, and like you see, as with any other art or design project, it's just a process, and get there by adding in different individual elements. And yeah, it's not always going to look great, but you do just have to persevere and you'll get there. So let's add in some materials to this. Go to the shading tab and hide our annotations again by unchecking annotations. So let's add a quick ground color, which will make something like a neutral. And let's turn down our specular, increase our roughness, and let's add a base color of something autumny. Have a little less saturation. Okay, and we'll have it a little darker. Okay, let's just turn on our ambient occlusion here so it looks a little nicer. And let's continue adding some materials. Let's add something for our bark or wood. And again, we're going to go for a similar tone to this, quite neutral. And turn down the specularity and increase the roughness. And I think we'll make this a little darker. And we'll just change the hue ever so slightly. Okay, now let's apply this same one to our branches. And let's hide this 3D cursor because it's kind of annoying. Again, 3D cursor, uncheck. Cool. And we'll add in a material for our leaves. So let's turn down our specular, increase our roughness. Not something you have to do, of course, just personal taste. And let's go for something within the same color family, more or less, just to give us a starting point. And the lowest one is going to be quite dark. I think we'll go for this tone. Yeah. And we're just going to increase the lightness and the saturation gradually as we go up. So what did we call this? Let's call it base leaf. And let's create a new one here called mid leaf. And we will change our base color to this and just modify it a little bit. Okay, nice. Now let's do the top one. Let's call this top leaf. And again, we'll just grab the previous color and adjust it slightly. Sorry, we don't want to do the subsurface, we want to do the base color. There we go. And with our color picker here, let's grab previous color and increase the brightness and the saturation. Okay, cool. So that is how you could make a little low poly tree just with those basic commands and the subsurface modifier that we've got going on here, or subdivision modifier. And yeah, play around with it. I know it sounds a bit confusing to begin with. It does to absolutely everyone, unless I don't know, you were born with it. But yeah, just have fun, play around, and you'll get there. Okay, cool. So we have gone through the basics of the different things that you need. Obviously there is loads more, and we couldn't possibly cover it in a video without everyone falling asleep on me. So maybe more to come. And yeah, I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the comment section down below, or get in touch with me directly via Discord or the website, thepolymodelsworld.com. And have a great day, everyone.